Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today it's a beautiful day. I live in Utah, zone 6/7. It is the third week in October, and it's finally time to plant my garlic. Now, I've already prepared the beds. I'll link a video up above that shows you how I prepared my winter garden beds. That's the exact same way that I prepared my garlic beds. And then also, this year is going to be a little bit different. I have never planted shallots, but we're also going to plant some shallots, and we'll talk a little bit about those. Now, I don't purchase new garlic every year. I'm not very picky about the type of garlic I eat. I've actually grown a bunch of different varieties one year just to see if there were some that I liked more than others. And I actually really liked my grocery store garlic a lot better than any of the other ones that I grew. Now, I bought this garlic at the grocery store about 15 years ago, and I probably ended up buying it more than one time. So let me show you here. These are garlic that I pulled out of my garden beds. This one right here, if you look very carefully on the inside, has a little hard section. This is a hardneck garlic. And then this one right here is just got little, it's got its papers folded all the way through, and there's no little hard section. This is a softneck garlic. So somehow I have softneck garlic and hardneck garlic all mixed into my bed, and I don't worry about it. All of it, in my experience, at my house lasts exactly the same amount of time. I always have non-sprouted, perfectly good garlic from the previous year by the time I am ready to plant my new garlic the next year. So this was last year's garlic. And then I do have one that a friend gifted me. A friend gifted me a bunch of different things. And this is going to be a hardneck garlic. I cannot remember the name, but they said that this was one of their favorite tasting garlics. And we've got it marked with a little piece of tape here so I don't forget what it is. And we'll plant it in just a little bit of a different spot so that we can know which one it is. Now, one reason that I don't grow a bunch of different types of garlic is I am not really good at keeping things labeled and separate, especially when it comes to things like garlic. Put them all in the bed in fall, and then when you pull them out in the next spring, it's really difficult to keep everything separated. So I basically just let them get mixed up. But I'll try and keep this one separated. Look at how huge these cloves are. It's really pretty. But I do have to say, my homegrown garlic, the cloves are pretty huge too. Now, when I save garlic from the previous year, I always save out 10 heads of the largest cloves and that are the largest bulbs. So these are quite large. The cloves on them are pretty big. They're a little bit smaller than they were 2 years ago. But look at that size clove right there. So I do try to save out the best ones for the next year. So that's my garlic. Let me show you how we're going to split them up. We're going to split this one up when it's time to plant it so I don't get it mixed in with everything else. But I take my heads. I'm going to get a plastic bag just to kind of contain the mess a little bit. And then each garlic head has a papery covering over the top. We're just going to start pulling that papery covering off. You can just use your fingers and pull it off. So you just pull it off like that. Now, I don't like to take off too much of the papery covering because that is what's going to protect it in the ground. I'll then take my fingernails or a knife and run them along the edge of each bulb and just pull it off. And then we'll stick it in my little container here. And then we'll do that for each of my bulbs. Now, if we have any really small cloves, which we usually do in the center of the garlic, I'll just pull those aside and use those for cooking. Now, I like to be able to have as much garlic as possible, so even if the cloves are this size compared to this size, I will keep all of them. It's just when they're really tiny like this one that I don't plant them. Now, just for interest's sake, let me show you the inside of a hardneck garlic. You can see the stem there. That was the stem where the flower came through. You can kind of see how that looks. And this is a softneck garlic. If I twist the bottom off, there's just garlic cloves and no stem. So our bowl is all ready. It's full of garlic hope and goodness for next year. I'm really excited about this. Some of the cloves are really quite large, and some of them are a little bit smaller, but that's okay. we're going to plant all of them. Now, one thing I did want to talk about is there's a lot of people that talk about all the special things you're supposed to do to garlic before you plant them. Some people will soak them in water, some people will soak them in fertilizer. I have never ever done any of that. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a good practice. Maybe it would help. You know, if you've had problem with garlic in the past, try it and see. I've never had problems growing garlic, so I'm not going to do that. Now, I live in a cold climate where over the winter we're going to get freezing weather. The ground is going to freeze, and the ground around the garlic is actually going to freeze, and that is okay. Even if the garlic starts to sprout, even if it gets this tall, which it does some years, it's going to be perfectly okay over the winter, even if it freezes. They're very, very hardy, and you don't need to do any sort of covering. Now, after we plant them, I'll show you that I will mulch them pretty heavily, but that's all I do for my garlic preparation. Now, if you live in a warmer climate where it's not going to freeze over the winter, you may need to adjust the type of garlic you buy, and I think it is, I'm not even going to say because I don't know which variety it is because I don't live in a warm climate. But research what type of garlic you need to grow in your climate, and also look into vernalizing or giving it the cold that it needs in the refrigerator. Not the freezer, but in the refrigerator. Because you can actually separate your garlic cloves like this, put them in a paper bag, stick them in the refrigerator, and you'll get the same effect as I'm going to give my garlic by planting it out and letting it freeze over the winter. Now, these cloves are not the only form of garlic we're going to plant. Last year when I harvested my garlic, I had two other forms develop. This right here is a garlic bulbule, and I will show you a picture of where I got those. Last year I planted bulbules this size, and then they became these. So this is, if you plant a bulbule, you'll need about 2 years to get a full head of garlic. You can either leave them in the ground, or you can dig them up like I did and then just plant them one more time. Now, I better hurry because they've pulled out the four-wheelers on my street, and they're going to start zooming up and down and making huge loud noises. But these are the 3 different sizes of garlic that I'm going to plant. And then we've got our 2 different varieties, the grocery store, which I don't know what it is, and then this variety that I also don't know what it is that I got from a friend. Now, as I said before, we're also going to plant some shallots. The type of shallots that I'm going to grow is a Dutch red, a French gray, and then this really large one that was also gifted to me. I don't know the names of these varieties, but we're going to plant a bunch of different shallots and try those out and see how they do. Last year I used starts from the nursery that were just like green onions, planted those, and they turned out really well, and I really loved the flavor. But if you plant them as bulbules like this, here in Utah, you can plant them this time of year and have them overwinter. Now, this is the first time I'm doing this, so we're going to see how well it does. So let's head over to my garden beds and I'll show you where I'm going to plant these. So now I really can't guarantee a lack of noise. I'll try to wait as much as possible for the noise to die down a little bit. But as I said, this is an urban neighborhood. We have neighbors that absolutely love their four-wheelers, and I don't have another time of day to do this video. So if we're going to be hearing four-wheelers, just know that people are having a lot of fun, and maybe you wish it was you. But anyway, we're here in front of my garden beds, and this is where I'm going to plant my garlics and shallots, and we'll show you where we're going to plant them. So this bed right here was my pepper bed. We took out the peppers, we added some compost, and then we added some fertilizer. And then, like I said, afterwards, we're going to mulch them with straw and with a little bit of grass underneath them. So this is some leftover grass from when I last mowed my lawn. And then we have this leftover pile of straw from when I mulched my fig trees last year. So the rest of this is going to be put over the last of my garden beds, and it will be all used up. This is my homemade compost. This is what I've been using in my garden beds. I just sifted out a little bit. And then we've got our pile that's getting ready for next year. Okay, so the neighborhood noise is starting to heat up. Everybody's out and about and doing noisy things, dogs barking, kids playing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go sound free here in just a second. We're going to plant all the smallest bulbules and smallest bulbs around the edge of my garden bed. I just like to do that to keep them separate so I know where to find them and they just don't get lost in the middle of my bed. And we're going to plant the largest ones just in rows through my bed, and we'll probably get about 120 cloves in there. That's what I average out every year. So now just really quickly, you always plant the pointy side up And then the side where the roots went, you plant that down. I usually just plant them a finger depth. You know, I don't really measure too much, and I try to keep them 4 to 6 inches apart. I put them closer together, and I in the past and ended up with smaller bulbs, but I want the larger bulbs. So let's turn off the sound, let you listen to a little bit of music, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll let you listen to the dogs bark. We'll see how I feel. But we'll be back and we'll talk a little bit about shallots after we're done with the garlic. So there we have it. The garlic bed is all ready, and it will just stay like this till probably the end of next June, possibly July. Now the grass underneath is going to provide nitrogen, and it'll just decompose and add more organic matter, as will the bottom layer of the straw. Now straw does decompose really quickly here. This bed up here was completely covered in, sorry about my shadow, but this bed up here was completely covered in straw this spring, and it's completely decomposed. Adds organic matter, and it's just a good thing to use. I've really liked using straw. The other thing the straw will do is it's going to prevent the ground from freezing. Now, it doesn't totally prevent freezing, but it prevents the freezing that goes deep enough to, you know, to kind of heave the bulbs out of the ground. Now, even if the ground freezes, as long as the bulbs are not heaved out, they'll be fine. For the first 8 years that I grew garlic here, I never used any type of mulch whatsoever. The ground was just bare, and that worked out absolutely fine. The one thing that I have noticed, possibly that could be a problem, is that the heavy straw layer keeps the ground too cool in the spring. The garlic comes up later, and then you end up harvesting it later, and I end up not having this bed to use as early as I would like. So I think this spring what I'm going to do, once everything starts warming up, I'm going to move the straw out of the way for a while, until everything really warms up, and then I will put the straw back over the top. So now we're going to plant the shallots in this bed. It's going to be the exact same process, so here we go. Now, just for my own records, and so everybody will know, I planted the Dutch red bulbs in the first part of this bed. The ones that were gifted to me were the first 2 rows there. And then the French gray are right along here. Now, I still have more of the bulbs left in the bag, and what I'm going to try and do is, in a couple of these pots, I'm going to try and see if we can grow the shallots in the pots. Now, I'm not sure how well they'll do because the pots are going to freeze. But we'll just see. We'll mulch them heavily and see what happens. Now I'm going to do the French gray in this first bucket, and then the Dutch red in the second one way over there. So everything's planted, everything's mulched. We've got, I think, 15 shallots in this one. And 15 to 20 shallots in this one. And then we're at the top of my garden right now, and this one and this one. I have 4 containers that I grow in. But these 2 containers don't have anything planted in them, and they won't. I did add compost and just straw mulch just to keep them covered for the winter. Everything is well watered in, and I will continue to water these, like twice a week until we start getting freezing weather. And then just a quick update on the winter veggies that I'm going to put under greenhouse plastic. This is my support. We'll be putting greenhouse plastic and frost cloth over these as soon as things start freezing. Right now, they're doing really well. They've gotten well established. They're starting to put on new growth, and they'll be good to go over the winter. These are some kohlrabi and some collard greens. We've got more collards in here, and maybe some more kohlrabi. We have a little tiny cabbage here. So with all my other cabbages, I grew them large inside in 1-gallon pots. This one I just planted straight outside because I had a spot, and that was a bad idea. They do much better inside over the summer than they do out here. Because all of these winter veggies, I planted the seeds near the end of August, beginning of September, and it was just really warm outside, and it did not fare well. These are my fall veggies that I planted in July. We've got some kohlrabi that's just about ready to harvest. Some more collards. I think we overdid it on the collards this year. Then we've got some cabbage that is just about ready to harvest. And as soon as this cabbage is harvested and the kohlrabi is harvested and I take out the zinnias, we'll put in a few more kale before we cover it. And then we'll just cover this and keep growing it over the winter. We also have a little volunteer arugula there that I don't know if it'll survive the winter or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And in this bed, I threw out some arugula seeds. I'm not going to cover this bed at all. I'm just going to let these grow, and if they survive, they survive. Also, these little guys, and I don't know how to plant them. This is the first time I've planted them. I'm not going to thin them out or anything. But this is corn mache, or M-A-C-H-E. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Supposedly very cold hardy, and I'm just going to let it grow in this bed uncovered and see how long it'll survive, and actually see if I like it. Now these are mostly cabbages with a few kohlrabi, just a couple of kohlrabi in it, some chiji misai, and a couple of green onions that we're going to overwinter. And you can see the difference in size in the cabbages and the difference in health over here versus the upper garden. These were grown out into 1-gallon pots and planted out here just a couple of weeks ago. So they got to be a nice large size inside where they were protected from pests and the hot weather. They did a lot better. So yet another garden chore finished. I am really excited that that is done. All of my winter veggies are now planted. I will not be planting anymore. From now on, it's just continued cleanup. So I would love to hear if you're wintering anything over in your garden, especially in the cooler climates. And if you do, what are you wintering over and how do you do it? So hopefully this video has been helpful. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.